but again, this is where Democrats and the
Sometimes it takes a while to reach consensus, but we're going to do the right thing here tonight. The American Relief Act of 2024 will provide temporary funding to get us into the first part of next year. We're excited about that because Republicans will have control of the White House and the Senate and the House, and we'll be able to make the key decisions about funding for the 2025 fiscal year. So this will allow us the opportunity to do that. In addition, we're going to take care of Americans who have suffered true devastating emergencies and disasters. We had, of course, a record hurricane season with Helene and Milton that did real damage across as many as 6 states. There's $100 billion to provide much needed relief to those people, those Americans who have really been struggling and still are from those storms. And in addition to that, we have $10 billion of emergency aid to our farmers and ranchers. Many of the small farms in America are on the verge of collapse, primarily because of Bidenomics and inflation. The high cost of inputs and fertilizer and seed and everything that they need to keep those farms going, and they've had 3 lost years in a row. Some of it because of drought, a lot of it because of the economics of it, and it doesn't make sense for lenders to provide them funding anymore. And so this is a stopgap measure to save those farms, to save food production in America, to ensure that we have that diversity in the marketplace, and our food supply is directly related to national security. So it's a very, very important thing for both parties to do, to provide that aid. We also have a clean extension of the Farm Bill, a clean extension of health extenders that are necessary, and a couple of other details. Everything that I just told you was negotiated in a bipartisan fashion. Both parties agreed to these terms, and that's what's on the floor right now. The only change in this legislation is that we are going to push the debt limit to January 30th of 2027. We will push it beyond that, or to that time point, and that will allow us to do the important work of governing in the new Congress. Why does that matter? Because we are committed to cutting hundreds of billions of dollars of wasteful spending out of the federal budget. That's what we're going to do. The Doge effort with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, the commitments that President Trump made on the campaign trail will come to fruition when we get about that very important work for the American people. The government is too big, it does too many things, and it does very few things well. We're going to cut and limit the size and scope of the government and get it under control for the American people. We have a mandate to do so. President Trump received 77 million votes in the election. House Republicans, 74.7 million votes, the most in history. We know what we are to do. We're determined to do that. And even though this vote would push the debt limit to 2027, it in no way reflects any lack of enthusiasm on our part to get about those serious cuts for the American people. We have to have fiscal responsibility as a core principle of our party. So that's what the House Republicans are committed to, every single one of them. We will get together and do that work, and it begins in early January. I hope that this vote passes tonight. We will send it to the Senate. We will extend funding, and we'll come back, and we will have the America First agenda come in roaring in January for the American people. Thank you so much.
All right, Gowdy, former congressman from South Carolina. Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist, and former Republican National Committee Communications Director Douglas High. Still have Chad Pergram on as well. Trey, you've been through these things. What do you think of this evolution from the 2 bills? I mentioned that there were, pictures of the first one, 1,500 plus pages, and then the smaller one, about 100 pages, and Republicans think this is the way to do it. That's John James who tweeted that one out. What do you think?
I think the president is right. No president wants to deal with the debt ceiling. I mean, it's not a ceiling, it's a suggestion. We have raised the debt suggestion, 80 times? So he's right to not want to deal with this. But, Brett, I went to law school because I'm not great with math. But even I can read the numbers. This ain't going to pass. It wouldn't even pass if it were under a rule. So why can't they take it to the Rules Committee? Because they held Kevin hostage and they put people on the Rules Committee that wouldn't even approve this. This is not going to pass under suspension. So I appreciate what Mike just said, but they got to go back to the drawing board, it looks to me, unless my math is even worse than I thought it was.
Chad, let me bring you in. The math is the math, and it doesn't look like it's the 2/3 vote. So are we pretty much headed for a limited government shutdown?
Not necessarily. Sometimes when you get into these things, and you have to kind of detect the biorhythms between the House and the Senate. Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader in the Senate, has been very quiet so far. And basically what might be happening here is Republicans put out their best play, something that they can't pass necessarily, and they can blame it on the Democrats and say, you guys should have voted yes, turn it around on them, even though they knew that they didn't have full support in their conference. But that's the play right now. A skinny bill, but they can blame the Democrats. What Chuck Schumer might do later tonight or first thing tomorrow morning is put out maybe an ultra skinny bill that just keeps the government open, maybe does some minimal things in terms of disaster relief or anything else. And if he can get that through the Senate quickly, I underscore quickly there because the Senate doesn't do things quickly necessarily, but if he can get that through the Senate quickly with that deadline of tomorrow night at 11:59, then he can turn it around and say, okay, we've got this through the Senate. This has more than 60 votes or 70 votes or whatever. And again, speed is the key, and then dare the House to reject that bill at the 11th hour. And I'm going to show you something else here that's very important at this stage. The government funding runs out at 11:59. Most federal workers do not go to work until Monday morning. In fact, then it will be off next Monday because of the Christmas holidays. The next pay period isn't until the pay is being processed right now. In fact, the 23rd is when the next pay period comes through. So you don't have to really worry about federal workers not being paid until early January. So if you have kind of an operational government shutdown over the weekend, and it really takes them till Saturday night or maybe Sunday night, but any time before, some of those federal workers go back on Monday morning, because again, some might be gone for Christmas, you're probably okay. So long as the Office of Personnel Management has not sent a message saying we are shut down, they're probably okay, Brad.
And this is a blame game, and we've gone through this many times before, Leslie. Democrats are going to say Republicans, through President-elect Trump and Elon Musk, they've already been out and about saying this, that they were forcing this issue, and they're the ones that are going to shut down the government. Again, Chad's saying maybe that's not going to happen. But then Republicans are going to point to, the Democrats forced them into this issue with this big bloated bill. So we get back and forth. But in the end of the day, President Trump pretty much gets what he wants, with a debt limit maybe pushing 2 years down the road.
He may get what he wants, but he doesn't have what he needs. And what he needs is a united Republican Party with a strong leader. And I'm just not seeing that as a Democrat. And remember, the party in power gets the blame, and the party in the power of the House are the Republicans. Mike Johnson is viewed not just by the left, but by the right as spineless right now. When you have, I agree with you, and as a Democrat, and I think Americans don't want 1,500-page bills. They do prefer this 116-page bill. But they also know it was Republicans that originally had proposed pay raises. And they also know there were Republicans like Chip Roy who were on the floor and saying, look, this is going to add $5 trillion down the road 2 years to the debt. So that is an issue. So he might get some numbers, but I think he gets a fragmented party.
Yeah, and it's failed now. Chad, that's right. I mean, we can definitively say by these numbers on the screen.
The vote is still hot right now. They haven't gavelled it down, but if you look at these numbers, that delta to get to 2/3, they're never going to be able to make that up on the Republican side. There are 27 Republican no's. We thought it might be a handful, maybe 10, 15. There's no way they can get to that. So again, the vote is still hot. But this will be defeated when they gavel this down. This is not going to pass, and we are staring at a shutdown tomorrow night.
Doug, hi, we talk about shutdowns a lot. We've been through these fiscal cliffs a lot. It always happens, seems to happen right around the holidays, as we've jammed a lot of funding for the government into these final days so that they could have people vote in order to get on a plane to go home for their Christmas break. But here we are, and if you get a government shutdown, there's a lot of people in America that say, that's okay, isn't it, for a couple days?
Well, for a couple of days, maybe, and for some of the reasons that Chad pointed out. But the government shutdown of 2013 lasted 16 days. That's a long time of people not getting certain checks, of parks being closed and so forth. And Brett, I remember 12 years ago tomorrow, I was in a meeting in HC5 of the Capitol. Congressman Gowdy was there as well, when House Republicans, including leadership staff like myself, failed to get an agreement on what we called Plan B on the Bush tax cut expiration. That meeting started with John Boehner reading the Serenity Prayer. When you're doing that, you're not in a good situation. And clearly this is where House Republicans are right now because they're in charge of the House. But ultimately, this isn't about Elon Musk or Donald Trump or House Republicans or Senate Democrats. This is about Congress and the failure that Congress has had this year and in past Congresses as well to have, it's not very sexy, but a working appropriations process. When we're not passing our appropriations bills, Congress is not doing what it needs to do to avoid these situations, and it means the good things in this bill don't get passed into law as well. What was in the initial CR was about $190 million for pediatric cancer research. It's the Gabriella Miller 2.0 Act. Congressman Gowdy voted for that bill in 2014. That's been removed. These are the kinds of things that are non-controversial that Congress should do, but they should do it because they're doing their job, and that's the failure here.
You know, Trey, it is interesting. You know, this is how government has worked, and it's not well. And everybody campaigns on doing it differently, having regular order, and yet it still happens. So this time was different. Before this CR rolled out and everybody voted on it, it got public. I mean, on X, there were a lot of people digging into the 1,500 pages, and Elon Musk was one of them. So was Vivek Ramaswamy as they take over this Doge operation. Is it changing, do you think?
Yeah, I think what's changing, correct me if I'm wrong, Vivek Ramaswamy ran for president and lost. Elon Musk, to the best of my knowledge, has never run for anything. So if we're going to have people influencing politics, I mean, we have a president-elect. He told the House Republicans, vote for this. Clear the decks for me for 2 years. And what, right now we have 33 Republicans who have defied the president. Now, what would happen if a senator defied him on one of his nominees for a cabinet position? He's already promised primaries. Is he going to do the same thing for the House members that don't care what he wants? I mean, why is it good for a senator to be primaried and not a House member? We only have one president-elect, and his name ain't Elon, and it ain't Vivek.
Okay. Well, Chip Roy has been on the back end of some criticism from the president-elect, and he stood up today in this debate and pretty much excoriated his fellow Republicans. I think we have that soundbite. Chip Roy.
You never have any ounce of self-respect to go out and campaign saying you're going to balance the budget, and then you come in here and pass $110 billion unpaid for. So I think this bill is better than it was yesterday on certain respects, but to take this bill yesterday and congratulate yourself because it's shorter in pages but increases the debt by $5 trillion is asinine.
So, you got some pushback again. Inside this skinnier bill, Plan B, if you will, is this clean 3-month continuing resolution, clean farm bill package, disaster package as negotiated with Democrats, and a 2-year suspension of the debt limit. You know, the debt limit, Leslie, is sort of like the game of old maid. No administration wants to hold that card at the end. You know, they don't want to be the one voting on it. And, you know, pushing it back or eventually dealing with it overall is something that I think President-elect Trump wants to do.
Deal with it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's
That's
real.
the area where he comes to my side of the aisle. Democrats have wanted to get rid of the debt ceiling for years. We do have a problem, though, don't we? I mean, not just with messaging, but with actions. When you win elections, you know, speaking to people who are struggling with money and saying, you know, we want permission, if you will, to go above that line that we had that ceiling before with regard to debt, with regard to federal spending on one side of your mouth, and on the other side, you say that you're going to, you know, cut the spending. Americans are smarter than that, and I think they're going to wake up to it fast.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to gather all the numbers, gather the way forward, what's happening next. Stay with us here on Special Report.
Say your prayers, folks. Say your prayers.
They come back out, Chad, will they lay out a blueprint, or are we going to wait till tomorrow?
I think they have to wait right now because this was the next play in the playbook, and this isn't even going to be within 100 votes of what they needed. They needed probably somewhere around 270, 280 votes to get to that 2/3 threshold. And when I fillet the vote here, there's one president on the board, that's Marcy Kaptur, a Democrat of Ohio. She's an appropriator. Also, 2 Democratic yeas. You have Kathy Castor, who's a Democrat of Florida, who wanted the disaster aid. Her district was ravaged by the hurricane. And also Marie Gluesenkamp Perez, She is the Washington State Democrat, probably the most conservative Democrat in the House, who sometimes bucks her party, won in a Trump district there. Looking at some of the Republican no's, Debbie Lesko, who's retiring, Nancy Mace, Beth Van Dyne, Ralph Norman, Thomas Massey, who's a member of the Rules Committee. You see, that was the problem with getting it through the Rules Committee, Eric Burleson. So they weren't even able to get some of the most conservative members of the House of Representatives, and that's a pretty robust number right there. I mean, this is where we keep talking about Republicans on all these big bills in the past 2 years have needed Democratic assistance. The Republicans are in the majority, and this is where, you know, some people on the Democratic side find it to be a little bit rich when they turn around and say, you guys didn't help us fund the government. Well, they're in the majority, and it was the Democrats who bailed out the Republicans on vote after vote after vote on the debt ceiling and other government funding bills throughout the past 2 years.
Chad, as always, keeping us straight and honest from Capitol Hill. Thank you very much. Trump's desires, wants, equities in the fight. So the question is, can he survive a speaker vote on January 3rd? Trump put out on Truth Social, maybe, if he does this a strong way, but this vote's going to fail tonight.
Yeah, but it's not Mike Johnson's fault. I mean, he's got a dysfunctional family. Mike Johnson is not dysfunctional, but several of his family members happen to be. They never should have gotten rid of Kevin, Brett. I mean, this all goes back to what was your plan when you got rid of McCarthy? They said they were going to cut spending. They said they were going to do this. The guy that instigated it, he's out there singing happy birthday to 17-year-olds on Cameo. So, I mean, what was their plan when they got rid of Kevin McCarthy?
Oh, mercy.
So, no, it's not Mike Johnson's fault. I mean, 30-something people. Nancy Mace would not be in the House if it weren't for Donald Trump. And she can't vote the way that he asked her to today? I hope he's got as long a memory for House members as he does senators that even threaten to not support one of his nominees. That's what I hope. His memory is good.
Doug, final word.
Man, do I miss being in meetings with in the House with Trey Gowdy. He's exactly right. Says it better than probably most people could. And this is going to be the challenge. We've seen so many stories about how's Mike Johnson going to govern House Republicans. Donald Trump's the leader of the party. We say so often it's a Trump party. This is the test for him moving forward.
That's right. You got to lead.
I would somewhat agree with the two guys. Look, I think this definitely is a test, but I don't think it's President-elect Trump. I think it's the other guy in the room, Elon Musk, who's making that decision. He liked this watered-down version or a smaller, less version of a bill, and you know Johnson couldn't get it over the finish line. Also, you have people like Rand Paul talking about getting rid of Johnson and putting in Elon Musk in that position. So I'm not sure he'll survive.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be fun to cover, no matter how it goes. We've got you covered. Breaking news tonight. Panel, thanks so much.